What do we have here? Why, it's a Pavel Bure pocket watch. It is a subscriber watch. It's from Ross. And we'll see what we can do about this one. It does actually reluctantly run for a few seconds. But then it stops. And from the looks of it, it's been a little while since it's been serviced or cared for. And this is a pin set, or sometimes called nail set pocket watch. You see that little knob next to the crown. You have to press that in and then you can set the time. And we see the case is in okay shape. The dial and the crystal looks pretty bad. Hands as well. But we'll open it up and see what's hiding. Well, the first thing we see is the Russian coat of arms. That's interesting. And that's Pavel Bure movement in there. See the balance oscillates okay. That's the most important thing. When we take the crystal off, or the bezel with the crystal, there seems to be some shellac or something like that around the edge. Maybe used to secure the crystal. And we see the dial has a few cracks, which is pretty common with enamel dials. See how we can clean that up. And there's quite a lot of hair actually on the pinion for the second hand. That surely doesn't help it run. And these hands are in pretty beat up shape, especially the minute hand, which I'm not even sure is original. We'll look a little bit closer at it, but looks a little bit fishy. So on these old watches, the dials are secured with these dog screws. So we already loosened them, and we can loosen the set screw for the stem. And there's obviously no setting lever, given that this is a pin set watch. Now the cannon pinion is insanely stuck. So I also see that there are quite a few marks on the dial side. You can see those scratches or marks going out from the center, so probably someone else has struggled with this cannon pinion as well. And when I say cannon pinion, it's actually not really a cannon pinion, at least not in the traditional sense. Quite a few of the screws, but also of course the cannon pinion here, was very stuck. So I used some Schraubenlöser, some rust remover to try to get it off. But it was a real struggle. And in the end I didn't even manage to get it on camera. But I did get it off. Over on the train side it's a pretty straightforward layout. But a kind of cool way to do it with the crown wheel and the ratchet wheel. So we'll get back to that. See also that the balance is a split balance. That was done in the old days for temperature compensation. So you have two metals fused together. And given that metals expand and contract a little bit differently, the idea is that these two metals will cancel each other out. And we also saw that the balance is cut. Under the microscope we see there's quite a lot of crud in these jewel holes. So we will have to peg them. That's pretty standard in watches that haven't been worked on for a while anyway. So while we rip this watch to pieces, we can talk a little bit about Pavel Bure. He's a Russian former professional ice hockey player, nicknamed the Russian Rocket. He played for a 12 season in the NHL with Vancouver. Hey, you sure we have the right script? This guy doesn't seem to be a watchmaker. At least not 100 years ago. Alright, so we're back. Sorry about that. I see this lovely way of making the winding works. It's very nice and very dirty. Anyway, as I was saying, or actually not, Pavel Bure was a Russian businessman with German roots. And in the late 1800s, he bought a watchmaking factory in Le Locle in Switzerland. And he used that to establish a very successful business in Russia. He was a supplier to the imperial court, so to the Tsar basically. And that's also the emblem we saw in the watch case back. And business was really good. This movement, this watch, is one of the later ones that they made. They kind of went out of business in 1917. A certain event made it less beneficial to be a supplier to the imperial court. Tell me in the comments if you know what that event might have been. And they made some very nice watches. This is a relatively simple watch, but you can find some really nicely decorated watches from Pavel Bure. So after 1917 they actually moved to Switzerland and established the brand there as the Pavel Bure, written in normal Latin alphabet and not Cyrillic, as you might have seen on the dial on this watch. Anyway, we took everything apart. The watch is not a complicated one, of course. It's just very dirty. Ooh, someone has been a dirty watch. The barrel is also quite difficult to open. But if there's one lesson I learned from life, it's that brute force is a solution to any issue. I mean, honestly, that is the key reason why I chose to go into watchmaking. You know, these testosterone-filled hunks that call themselves watchmakers and just look for an excuse to go amok and smash things. Oh yeah. It's like either having one of those padded rooms that you can hit and break things in, or you can have a watchmaker's bench. Kind of two sides of the same coin. So we're going to pre-clean everything since it's so dirty. We're going to use our trusted ultrasonic. That will help us get the crud out of most of these parts. I'm not gonna torture you with that sound right now, we'll do that later. I wanted to take a closer look at the balance. We can see that it's a cut balance, and it's also fused with steel on the inside and brass on the outside. And these things together makes this balance compensate somewhat for temperature changes. And while we let the cleaning machine do its magic, Let's have a look at the bezel and the crystal and the case. Not in too great shape. And also apparently a while since I cut my hair. Or maybe that's a nose hair. I never can tell those apart. The crystal we are gonna change. There's no point keeping it. But we are gonna also put the case and this chain through the ultrasonic. Let's see what we get out of that. And here is the sound. Enjoy. Ew! So it seems we might have to actually clean it a little bit more then. So we're going to use Never Dull. That and Cape Cod are very popular products for cleaning these kinds of cases and metal that you want to get a little bit shinier. It's a mild abrasive, but it's definitely not good for your health because of the fumes. So use this in a well ventilated space. But it does give a pretty good result. In the meantime, our cleaning machine has done its magic. And it's also actually a few weeks later, because we needed to get a new mainspring. Mainsprings are in general relatively easy to find, but for these old watches there are commonly some issues. For this one, the issue is that the barrel arbor is smaller than the inner coil of the spring. So we're going to use this bend shaping pliers for doing that. You have to be very careful. It's not very difficult at all to break the spring. But that seems to have been enough. Alright, with the new mainspring in the barrel, we can oil the capstones. This watch is from 1916, so obviously quite a while before Inca block or that type of shock setting became common. So these capstones are not shock settings. They are only there to help the balance oscillate better or more freely. As you can imagine, they're also difficult to come by if you need to replace any of these. The jewels are very thick. So it is a little bit of a hassle to oil these old balances this way. But that's how it was done. The hairspring does show a tiny little bit of corrosion, but it still works well, so we're not going to do anything about that. Would also be very difficult to do anything about it. We're also oiling the dial side capstone, of course. A little bit more straightforward. And let's see how the balance oscillates. And that looks very nice. All right, we can start rebuilding the train. Speaking of train and pocket watches, I think I can say with pretty great certainty that a pocket watch with a train on it, like engraved, was what first really excited me about watches. I was like 15 at the time. I remember seeing this watch in a watchmaker store, and I really wanted that watch. It's just very fascinating, I felt. Of course, pocket watches weren't really in fashion then. I'm not quite that old. But pocket watches still have a certain appeal, I think. And buying a pocket watch nowadays is actually very cheap. And by that I mean vintage pocket watches. You can get a nice watch with a beautiful movement for 100, 200 US dollars or euros. I will have a couple more pocket watches on the channel in the relatively near future. Obviously most of the watches I do on this channel are watches that will be put up for sale. Sometimes that takes quite a while for various reasons. But most of these watches on the channel will be sold. So if you are interested, of course, you can comment below and I will respond. This one is Ross's watch, so not for sale. And if you're beginning with this hobby as well in watchmaking, then pocket watches are of course great candidates for learning because of their size. Everything is big on pocket watches, kind of like with Norwegian men. But it's always best to find one that is running before you start working on it. Otherwise it can be very difficult to find out what's the problem and correct it. So we see the yoke is this combined yoke and setting lever that you then press in with this pin in the case. So that's how it works on this one. With the keyless works in place, we're almost ready to get everything running. And it's a nice movement to work on. It's a beautiful little movement, not very highly finished, but very nice looking. And I like this solution that was made with winding works. Given that this is an 18,000 beats watch, we are using 941, so the oil on the exit pallet stone. You can use grease as well, it wouldn't make a big difference, but this is how I was taught it. Let's see then if this baby wants to run. And she does. On these big pocket watches we're using 90-20 oil instead of 90-10. Otherwise it's very similar. And what you might also see is that there are fewer jewels on the dial side. Now why might that be? Comment below. And with the watch demagnetized, let's see how it runs. And that actually looks really good. See, the lift angle is way too high, so with the correct lift angle we see the amplitude is very good and it's just running very well. I'm quite impressed with this watch, to be honest. And now for something completely different. We got a cup full of lukewarm water, and we're going to put our enamel dial inside it. And we're not dropping a candy in there. That would not go down well with my kids, wasting candy like that. It's a denture cleaning tablet. We're gonna let the dial soak in that for about 24 hours. And then we'll see what comes out. For the hands, the news is not so good. The minute hand especially is very corroded. And so bad that there's a little weak point in it that might even make it break. We will try to clean it up, but I'm not even sure if the minute hand is original. And the main reason I'm saying that is that the hole is not in the center. And that just seems very odd, because the hour hand is beautifully made. But the minute hand, not so much. Gonna see a close-up a little bit later where that is very visible. So we are gonna make a hand, a new minute hand for the watch. We're gonna mimic the shape of the existing minute hand, but we are gonna put the hole in the center. That's generally considered beneficial for watches. If we look closely at the existing hand, you see that this just doesn't look very good. One way to ensure we get the hole in the center is to use this V-chuck. So we used shellac to keep the steel rod in place. And then we first use centering bore, and then we drill the hole to about the correct size. And when I say about to the correct size, the reason is that these old pocket watches were pretty much one-offs. So they weren't made by machines as such. They weren't made for mass production. Parts weren't interchangeable and so forth. So the actual size for the hole should be about 0.73 millimeters. But we don't have a 0.73 millimeter bore, so we're going to use a 0.7. And then we'll open the hole out a little bit with the broaches later. So this steel rod that we just drilled a hole through the center of, we put in our watchmaker's lathe. And we're gonna cut this down to 0.4 millimeter. That's the thickness of the other hand. So we're doing this with the hand graver. Have to be very cautious, of course, because the hand is about 2 centimeters long, so a 2 centimeter long piece of 0.4 millimeter thickness is quite fragile. So we're doing this a little bit at a time. Very important, of course, to have a very sharp graver while you're doing this. The sharper the graver, the less pressure you need to put on. So regularly sharpen the graver on an Arkansas stone. And yes, I know Americans would say an Arkansas stone. We made a little leaf, as you can see, this little bulbous shape, a little bit in from the end, because that's how it was on the other hand. Now, one thing to note is that this is one way to make a hand like this. The most common way is to take a little steel plate and then cut out the approximate shape of the hand, and then file it down to the correct proportions. So doing it the way I did ensures that you have the hole in the center, but of course you still need to do filing. Dada corn. My daughter and I have matching unicorn dada corn t-shirts. So after some filing, this is what we're left with. Before bluing the hand, we're going to polish it a little bit more. We have this glass plate with abrasives in different grades. And it's coincidentally a really good way to remove your fingerprint. If, for instance, something forced you to leave your native Norway, and just hope no one digs in the backyard where you used to live. Steel turns blue when it's heated to a certain temperature, around 300 degrees Celsius. Hey, mind your nose there, buddy. And we simply use a burner and put the hands in some brass shavings, and then watch very carefully as they start changing color. Now, there is an issue, and that is that different steels with a different carbon content blew in different colors. And that is why I had to make another hand. Anyway, let's put the rest of the watch back together. We see this little pin here. That is the actual Canon pinion. That is a friction fit into the tube of the center wheel. So what looks like the Canon pinion actually just have to be friction fit on that pin. And we saw it was a little bit too tight before, so we're going to open it a little bit with a cutting broach and then smooth it out with a smoothing broach. At the bottom here you see the cutting broach. It's got 5 sides with the sharp edges that cut a little bit of the metal, and then we smooth it out with a round smoothing broach. And this is something we have to do very carefully so we don't take too much. So in practice that means try and repeat. And there were a few more times I didn't show you. Alright, we got the dial back, and we see the dial cleaned up very nicely. And it smells very fresh also. The cracks are still there. We cannot easily remove those, but what the denture cleaner does is that it removes the dirt that's stuck in the cracks. Now, I said before that this is a very simple watch, but look, it has a quick set GMT function. So obviously our hand is a little bit too loose, so we're going to tighten the collet on it with this special tool. And yeah, I don't even know why I bought it. In the old days we just put it in a chuck in the lathe and just tighten it a little bit. But that's capitalism for you. With the hands back on, we can put the crystal on and secure the stem, and then we're pretty much ready. And there we have it. Beautiful old watch. Hopefully looking a little bit better now, and certainly running better. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then clicking like and subscribe will really help the channel. We'll be back shortly with another video. Until then, ta-ta.